Hello everybody, I'm Stephanie. Today we're continuing on in our series, Yoga for Low Back Pain, and we're looking at flexibility in the body. So join me on your mat wherever you're at and let's get started. So in this video series, we're looking at the 4 areas that we can bring more awareness to help heal our low backs. And of course, my cat is here again because this is my yoga cat. He's got to be here every single time I'm on my mat. But if you have not looked at the 2 previous things we've talked about, we have looked at balance in the body, learning to rebalance things and getting inflammation down, and also to get our mental state, to get some of that stress down, to bring some balance back into our lives. And then we looked at building some strength, not just strength in the core, but also strength in the glutes. I feel like a lot of times when anybody says, oh, I have low back pain, the first thing people say is, well, you should build your core strength. And that is true, but we sometimes forget about the glutes. So if you haven't looked at those 2 videos, actually it was 3 videos, those 2 things we've talked about in 3 videos, I encourage you to go back and look at those. But today we're going to be talking about flexibility, and not so much how to become more flexible, but noticing how we're flexing in our bodies, where that motion is coming from. So we're going to first look at forward bends. When we're forward bending, a lot of times I have heard the cue, I have been giving the cue in some of my previous videos, you may have noticed, that you should bend from the waist. We always say bending from the waist when you're forward folding, but that is not where a joint is. There's no joint right here in the middle of our waist. It is happening at the hips. So instead we want to think about our body splitting in half, and one half is from the hips up, and the second half is from the hips down. So we're going to look at this from a seated position first. I'm going to turn sideways so you can see what I'm talking about. When we're forward bending, if this motion is coming from the waist and you forward bend, you're going to see or feel in your body this kind of arching. And what happens as you do that is it really strains the low back. So instead, I want to sit nice and tall on my sits bones. So on those bones underneath in the very base of the glutes, doesn't matter how much fluff there is, when you find those sits bones, it's that very pointy point there underneath all the fluff, not just grounding down there, but feeling the length first, because when we're sitting back on the fluff, we're not sitting as tall as we can. So sitting first on those sits bones and then thinking split in half, hips up and hips down. When I'm forward folding, I'm bending from the hips and I'm allowing the pelvis to move, and it's tipping slightly. And as it's tipping, those sits bones are going to come off the mat a little bit. So I'm not grounding down and then bowing. That's going to put more strain on my low back and down into the SI joints. And you can really see this from a standing position. So we're going to take it up to standing. And this is where I see it a lot in class, and I've done it a lot in my own body. When we forward fold, if you're bowing from the waist, again, you're going to get this arch. And what does it do? It puts this strain and this big stretch on the low back. That's not what we're going for. We're bowing from the hips. If I need to, I can soften the knees, but I'm bowing and finding this motion from the hips. So standing as tall as I can and bowing from the hips. It might feel like you're back bending a little bit, because what's going on is as you're forward folding from the hips, the tailbone begins to reach back. And then as you continue to forward fold, the tailbone shifts and begins to reach up. So again, inhale, arms reach up overhead, don't hit your wall. And then we're swan diving, really finding that motion. Goodness, I just hit the wall again. From the hips. Don't be distracted by the things on the wall. But bowing all the way down. I'm keeping this long line. So even when I come back up, inhale, halfway lift, there's my motion in the hips. And exhale, coming back down. So just paying attention to that. Again, you can soften the knees if you need to, but the motion's coming here and not here. if you can feel the difference, so it's not the low back. So bending from the hips, not the waist, and bending only as far as the hips can tip. So if you're going and those hips, they're like, oh, that's as far as they're gonna go, that's as far as you're gonna bend. It doesn't matter if the fingers touch the floor, if they don't. If you're so concerned with the fingers touching the floor, bend the knees. That just lengthened your hands, then they get down. But really bending that from the hips. Second thing we're gonna look at is where you're back bending from. And I've even given this cue incorrectly. I've said from the base of the spine, find your length and go back. Or even when we're down in Cobra, really find that length in the low back. That's not where the length is coming from. We want to make that back bend happening in the center of the spine, in the thoracic spine. So you've got your cervical spine at the top, your thoracic in the center, and the lumbar in the lower. Most people, when they have injury to their back, where is that happening? Low back, lumbar. Why? Because this is where we're putting all the pressure, and that's not where a lot of movement is. Most of the movement is in the thoracic spine. And you can begin to feel this when you're on your back first. So we're going to take it down to the back and come into bridge pose. So walking the feet back, ankles underneath the knees, knees as wide as the hips, palms grounding down in the side, gaze up towards the ceiling. On your inhale, lift your hips, lift your core, and just noticing what's going on in your body. Most of the motion is in the center of the back. It's almost straight from the hips down to the knees. There's this long line. There's not much motion coming from the low back. And you can really begin to feel this if you inhale, lift the heart, and the shoulders walk underneath you. That's lifting the heart, the center. So what's in the center there? The thoracic spine, the very center. So we're going for this same feeling whenever we're back bending. And then coming back down. And I'm going to show you this again from a kneeling position this time. We're going to bring the palms to the low back. Get as tall as you can. And with your exhale, think center of the back, center of the back, center of the back, center of the back. There should be barely any pressure in the glutes and the low back. Some people, they like the cue of engage the glutes, press the hips forward. And for most people, that cue is okay. But for those of us that have more flexibility than we're supposed to, or have that hypermobility, we can go past a healthy point. So when we hear that cue of press the hips forward, we press them forward, and what happens inside the body, those SI joints go, and then we go, oh my gosh, my low back, what's going on? So again, paying attention, center of the back, inhale, lengthen, exhale, barely any pressure, low back, finding it center of the back, center of the back, center of the back. I'm not pressing the hips forward. And then coming back up. So that's forward bending and back bending, and then we're gonna look at twists. When it comes to twists, you will hear a lot of cueing to ground the hips down, to ground the pelvis down, and to twist. And I've even given incorrect cues before to say twist from the base of the spine. Well, where's the base of the spine? Low back. And I'm wondering, why in the world is my low back hurting? Because I've been giving this cue to not only you, but to myself to twist from the base of the spine. So we're not twisting from the base of the spine. Where's that motion happening? Thoracic, center of the spine. Not only that, but I'm going to allow my hips to move with the spine. And you can really see this when we do a seated twist. So I'm going to begin with my left leg long. Bend your right knee, bring your right foot in, and cross the right foot over. Right hand is going to come to the base of the spine as close as I can get it. And left hand's just kind of gently hugging the right knee. Inhale to lengthen, and as I'm beginning to twist to the right, I'm going to let my left hip go forward. And you can really feel this because your left heel will slide forward just a little bit, so the pelvis is going with the spine. I'm not grounding the hips down and twisting from the low back. I'm allowing the movement to come center of the back and let my hips go with my pelvis. And I have found that I can go so much deeper when I allow my hips to move with my spine. And then coming back to center, Left hip comes back in line, and you'll feel that heel slide back. We're gonna do the same thing on the other side. This time, right leg goes long, bend your left knee, left foot comes in, cross your left foot over to the right. Left palm as close to your glute as you can get it. Right palm to your left knee. Inhale, lengthen. With your exhale, as you begin to twist, allow. You're not pressing through, but allow the right hip to go forward. And I can feel this because my hips are shifting. My left hip almost slides back a little bit on the mat, and my right heel goes forward as it's lengthening. Inhale, lengthen again, and then find that twist, very center of the back. You shouldn't feel much motion. There's a little bit in the low back, but it's not centered there. We're just changing our thought patterns. I'm just sharing some of the things that I've learned that have helped me to heal in my body. It may help you, it may not. I hope it does. And then coming back to center. So allowing the hips, the pelvis to move with the spine. And then we're going to take this into a standing posture. And this is one that I have revisited this posture over and over again. Virabhadrasana 2. I've already done 2 videos on it because I keep learning new things in my body as I watch students in their bodies, just seeing how people's bodies move. Allowing bodies to move. I feel like sometimes we force ourselves into these shapes and we're like, I have to look this way and it has to be this way, instead of going for what feels healthy, what feels right in the body. So I'm going to come into Warrior 2 with my left knee bent, left knee stacked over my left ankle, my right heel down and my right toes out. And as you come into this posture, you've heard me give this cue before, that if the left knee is traveling in, to press it back. Now, in most bodies, again, that is okay. But in bodies that are very, very flexible, what happens? Well, my hips are already turned to the side of the mat. My hip points are pointed to the side of the mat. And then when I press my knee back, it's tweaking inside of there, that hip joint and in the SI joint. It's creating all of this pressure. And where does that pressure end up going out? Into the low back. So instead, I'm going to allow my pelvis this time to go with my legs, and I'm going to allow my pelvis to twist, or basically not twist, but just come back into a natural alignment for myself until my left knee tracks in line with my left toes over top of my ankle. It's much more secure. If I'm here and I press it back and someone would come to press on my knee, I would not be very stable. But if I find that natural twist and alignment, then when someone would come to press on my knee, it's much more stable. No one's going to press on your knee. I'm just trying to make a point. So my hips instead are pointed at a diagonal. So where is the twist going to come? Where is that shape going to come for Warrior 2, Virabhadrasana 2? Center of the spine. So then I find my twist and I open it back up. It is much more comfortable. It is much more stable. I notice instead the strength in my body instead of the pain that I'd been feeling in my hips and my pelvis and low back for so long every time I came into this shape. I almost dreaded coming into this shape because I wasn't listening to my body. I was just going along with the cues that I've heard forever and ever. So forward bends, back bends, twists, and then last thing I want to talk about is a neutral back, changing this idea of going to a flat back. We don't have flat backs because we have bums attached to the base of our back. It's basically the top of our legs. And there's no way we can have a flat back. You might be made that way. So if you are, that is fine. But I know for me, when I think of the idea of flat back, I have to tuck and pull in because I've got all this extra fluff back here. So for so long, when I'd come into my tabletop, this is where I thought my flat back was. And you can see the arch, but it felt like it was a flat back for me. I was actually tucking my tailbone and pulling it in to make that flatness of what I thought should be there. So instead, I'm going to allow a neutral back, and it feels like a back bend in my body because I've been doing it wrong for so long. So you might need to do this with a mirror or with a person to say, hey, tell me when I come to a neutral back. You're gonna have that natural arch. It's gonna look and feel like it's an arch because you have the glutes. That's just the way that we're made. So I want that natural arch in my low back, but then I find my engagement in my upper back, so I'm not letting the shoulders come up by the ears, and then my core pulls into my spine. As that happens, very, very slightly, it tips the pelvis, but I'm not pressing it forward. You'll notice if you've gone one way or the other too far, because when you come from your flat back tabletop, or your neutral back, excuse me, and then you move into cat and cow, it doesn't go anywhere. But when I come from my neutral back to my cat and cow, then I know, okay, I'm arching, I'm back bending, okay, now I'm neutral. I want to keep this neutral feeling. The next thing you can check is your puppy dog pose. So from tabletop, walking the palms out, reaching the hips back at a diagonal. So they're not going straight back, they're not going straight up, they're going back at a diagonal. And I'm feeling this big, big stretch along the front side of my body. I'm feeling the stretch down through the armpits, down through the chest, down through the obliques. And for me, I begin to really feel it down into my hip flexors of my psoas. And this is where I can check to see if I am feeling very stressed, because when I get stressed and I come into this pose, that psoas muscle kind of goes bloop and pops out. Then I have to kind of calm it back down. But I'm just going for this feeling first from puppy dog. Stretching, tailbone back at a diagonal. Core is pulling in. And I've been doing it wrong for so long. Again, it feels like a back bend to me. And then taking this same feeling and taking it to my down dog. So neutral back, core in, arms engaged, tuck the toes. With your exhale, hips up and back at a diagonal. But I'm really, really, really paying attention to that feeling, again, of stretching the front side and going for that neutral back. So I'm not so worried about stretching the low back. I want to find that stretch in the center of the back. And how I know I can really do that is from my down dog, I'm going to soften my knees, reach my tailbone back and up even more so that it's not so much about the hamstrings. Because a lot of people come to down dog and they're like, oh, I can't. My hamstrings are so tight. We'll just take the hamstrings out of the equation. Maybe take the cat out of the equation also. So you can feel that same sensation as you did in puppy dog, and then start to relax those heels back and down. So I hope that has helped. I hope that has maybe made you a little bit more aware of the way you're moving in your body. So just to kind of recap here, forward bends, bending from the hips, not the waist. Back bends, back bending from the center of the spine, from the thoracic spine, not the low back, as I've been doing for so long. When you twist, allowing the pelvis to move with the hips. The pelvis to move with the spine. The hips are moving with the spine. Don't lock it in. Allow that movement to come from the center of the spine and not the hips. And finding your neutral back. Allowing that low arch to happen. Now these things that I'm talking about are not going to be blanketed across for everybody. Everybody has their own issues. I just know in my body, when it comes to flexibility, I always thought I had to push and push to come into these shapes. And I was pushing so hard that it was going past healthy flexibility into hyper flexibility. So thank you so much for joining me today and joining my cat on the mat also. Blessings and namaste.